Welcome, people, to our live stream, our first live stream at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. Welcome, because it's a special occasion. We've just heard 2 weeks ago that we have 1 million fans on Facebook, and that's quite an achievement, we think. And before we do something back, we'll show you some of the works in our collection in a live tour by me, and I'm Tayo. I'm a senior researcher at the Van Gogh Museum. My life is dedicated to studying the works of Vincent, his drawings, prints, his life, everything, paintings. And I will show you some of his works. And of course you will immediately encounter this work, a self-portrait. Vincent made many self-portraits, and we have quite a lot of them in our collection. But this is one of his last that he made in Paris, when he was working in Paris. He had, of course, a whole history before he came to Paris, but in Paris he discovered modern art and modern colors, and that's also where he got interested in himself in that case, because we don't know of any self-portraits before his Paris period. And in this one, as you look closely, you will see all the fine brushwork in which he made up his face as if it was pulled together here, and it radiates to the outside. There's a halo of blue and the complementary orange colors in the background, and very vibrant colors, you might say, of a man who is at a point in his life where he is a full modern artist, you might say. And Paris was, in that case, of course, the place to be in the 19th century. And I'll show you some more works through the tour. We start with Paris. We do not exactly in a chronological order. And there is a picture hanging next to this picture, which I would like to show you, because we have famous works, of course, in our collection, but we also have works, more small works, sketches by Vincent, which probably are not that famous as, well, the Sunflowers or other works. And this is one of them. This is one I particularly like. It was once described as a glass of water and a bottle standing next to it, but of course it's not. As it was said in the catalogue that we wrote, it must have been a teetotaler who wrote that, or who thought that, because it's a glass of a very poisonous alcoholic drink, from a very popular drink as well, especially in artistic circles in the 19th century in Paris. It's a glass of absinthe. Very high in alcohol, 60 to 70 degrees. He diluted with water, and it was one of Vincent's favorite drinks. Not only Vincent, but also some of his friends, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. And Vincent decided to make a small still life of just a simple glass of absinthe, the carafe next to it, on a cafe table, looking outside on the boulevard. But when you look how it's done, with this very minutely and thinly painted brushstrokes, as you see here, very minute, with almost one hair brush. That's not exactly how we think about Vincent when he's painting. He is this rough painter with the rough brushstrokes and the big impastos. But in France, he discovered all kinds of, in Paris especially, he discovered all kinds of other ways of handling your brush, and especially Toulouse-Lautrec was very influential for him for this painting, who would dilute this paint with oils or turpentine so that it gets this pale color, very fluent color, you might say, a watery color. And in this respect, he did it quite wonderfully with very fine tones of purple. As you can see here, this pale green, yellowish green. And that's the foreground. And the background has the same kind of colors, the pinks that have discolored a little bit. And then in the middle ground, you see the window of the cafe in more sturdy colors. A wonderful contrast, but looks, well, makes you think a bit about Japanese prints, where Vincent was very fond of Japanese prints, in which he had a whole collection of them. But this was at a point when this changes in life. So before he went to the south of France, where we know from his big and famous works, in Paris, and he came, and it's when he started to become a painter, in 1880 in the Netherlands. And that's where he worked first. And I'll show you some work, very, very strange work from this early period, which was only quite recently hung here in the museum. Of course, we have works in the depot by Vincent. We have lots of works hanging in the galleries. This is a special one, and also I would like to show you something that what we do when we hang pictures on the wall. We don't simply hang them, that you just look at them, but we also sometimes do that. We make presentations of paintings, and that we highlight special aspects of them. Sometimes also for the children. We cater, you might say, for every audience, whether you're very small or you're very old, no matter what, you're welcome here. And sometimes we make a special presentation. We go to one which is perhaps something that you wouldn't have thought that Vincent would have done. A very strange still life. And it's in that section of our museum is when you come in and when you enter and when you go up the galleries to look at his work. that you start with this early period. And now we're coming closer to it. And here it is. It's a fairly large painting of a flying fox. Well, flying foxes are not native to the Netherlands, not at all. They come from the southern hemisphere, especially Indonesia, but also the South Africa. And this particular type is, as you can see in this presentation that we made, this educational presentation, it's tropical, and we have two examples of a flying fox from Natural History Museum, as you can see here. And then you can also, when you look at the painting, it's quite remarkable, then you can tell that the painting is almost life-size. And it's almost exactly the same size as the flying fox that you just saw, the one that's stuffed, so it's the old one, of course. And for Vincent, so where would he get this one, we wondered. And we know that in Nuenen, where he was living at the time in the Netherlands, in Brabant, in the southern parts of the Netherlands, close to a city called Eindhoven, there was somebody who collected these things, who had a whole collection of these birds and all these kind of animals. So he might have gotten it there, but we also know that some of his family members went to the East Indies, so the Netherlands had the colonies in Indonesia, and perhaps brought back some of these things as well. So I'm not exactly sure. But what he tries to do here, it's a painting from 1884, is that he tries to get some of the impression of a lighting from behind the flying fox, so that you can actually see how this bat-like wings shine through, the light is shining through on that side. So it's also an exercise, you might say, in clair-obscur, in light and darker shades. And you can also tell, we always usually describe this earlier period of Vincent, and everybody recalls them probably as such as these dark paintings with dark and muddy colors. But when you look close at them, you will see that these darker browns and muddy colors are all made up of pure colors. And Vincent was very capable of mixing these pure colors to this combination. So he was a colorist, you might say, already also in these darker, earlier works. And so for children, of course for the adults as well, we give extra information in these instances for the way Vincent uses his brush strokes, how the dark light effects work, and how he is in essence always, in the beginning was, you might say, a realist painter, that he always had to have a subject in front of him to paint. Beautiful picture, it's, I might say, and I bet that not many of you knew of this painting. Vincent heard about Impressionism when he was in the Netherlands, but he had never seen actually an Impressionist painting before. But he knew that if he wanted to go on, and his brother was pushing him to go on, that he had to go to Paris to learn something more about modern painting and modern art. And he did so. So he left Nuenen in Brabant. He went to Antwerp first, a couple of months to work at the academy, because he always thought that he had to learn and learn and learn. And now we come into this section where it might say that what's called back to basics is that learning at the academy, but trying to get also people to portray. He was one of his things also at the time that he thought, if I want to make a name for myself and I want to earn some money, because he was living on his brother's expenses all the time, maybe I could try my hand at portrait painting so I could earn a little for myself. This is another kind of portrait, of course. This is a practical academic joke in a skeleton in the skull probably from the academy, where he worked for only a couple of weeks. And the cigarette was attached later, so it's over the dry paint, was attached later as a joke, of course. Looks very modern, as smoking kills, it does. Whether they knew that in the 19th century, we're not so sure. We pass this one and we go to this one. Here's a very interesting little picture. Also, probably maybe people don't know. Vincent, when he came to Paris, he wanted to learn more and more about painting, and also but especially in painting in brighter colors. And here's an example. He bought several small statues to copy, for use for copy. So this is one original statue that Vincent bought when he was in Paris. And we have also the painting that he made to copy it. So a very simple study in more lilac-like purplish tones in the ground. There's this white, and of course you have all these shadows, these grey, blue, grey, purplish shadows that reflect on the white, which he is trying to capture in this. So these are studies. As you can tell, usually Vincent hardly ever signs these works. And what he did at the same time is that he made this painting in the summer of 1886 to learn and to know more about pure color, is painting flower still lifes. And it's, of course, you can paint flower still lifes quite easily in the sense that they're quite cheap to do. So people would bring flowers to him. They come in all kinds of colors, so they're very handy for all kinds of experiments with color, but also, of course, in brushstroke. And that's one of the two, you might say, the two important aspects of Vincent's art is this combination of the way how he works with color and the way how he handles the brush and how his brushstrokes work. And in this case, instance, with this stilla that he did in Paris, we also have the vase, the original vase, that Theo, where he lived with his brother in Paris, that they had at this disposition. And you can tell here you see a signature of Vincent. And that meant, usually, he had a small exhibition in a cafe in 1887 with lots of these Fowler still lifes. They were meant for sale. He would sign a picture when he thought it's good enough for sale, or when he would give it away. But in general, not many of his works are signed, which does not mean that he didn't like these works. It's more or less is that he was very hesitant in putting his signature on a painting. And here's another example that we have. We still have this small kingfisher bird stuffed, which he used for a very small, tiny picture, which you can see here, also in this Paris period. And what's quite funny in this fact is the way the kingfisher was prepared, you might say, is that in a more biological and in a scientific way. So it's like sitting on a perch or something. No, you can't see its feet. They're just stuck into his body, you might say. And when he painted it, he had difficulties with painting his feet. And it's very strange putting this kingfisher on a leaf of grass, because they usually sit on small perches and wooden sticks and things like that. And Vincent, in essence, you might say, was a realist painter who needed the example in front of him, and this is a very nice example of it. We go back to the Paris period here, and I want to show you something that we also do. We research his work, and what we do, and also in a scientific way, in looking at the paints, brushstrokes, what's underneath them. We want to know more about the paints and everything, and the pigments that he used, and we write about it in catalogs, but we also display it in our galleries, for instance. And I'll give you this example of this painting, which is a view from the house where he lived in Paris, together with Theo, so we call it Theo's apartment. You look over Paris in a southwestern direction. There's the Palais de Trocadéro, close to the Seine River, is over there, so from Montmartre, which is higher up. And they had a wonderful view between the houses of there. And here you can see this influence that Vincent also had in Paris during this period in 1887, that he picked up on pointillism. So that's working, painting with these small dots that Paul Signac and Georges Seurat did, and Seurat actually invented. Vincent also applied it in several works, but he was never as strict as, you might say, scientific as Signac and Seurat were on it. With him, you will always find some expressive element, which gives it a little bit more life than sometimes the somewhat frozen works of Seurat and Signac, who are beautiful in themselves, of course. But this painting, for this painting, he used a canvas which he had already used in Nuenen. So he took several works which he had done in the Netherlands with him, took them with him to Paris, perhaps also to sell. But he was stuck with a lot of them, and when he was in need of money or didn't have enough money to buy his goods and things and canvas and like, he would reuse these paintings to paint over it. You can see here a presentation that we made, which is called about Van Gogh, an app which you can download. Here's the painting again, and there are all kinds of features that you can discover. And one of them, for instance, is the recycling, as we call it here. And you push the button, and it says rub, so I will rub. And what you will see appear here is the X-ray of the painting. There it is. Well, you might say, what do I learn now? Not as much as you might expect. So we push the button. What is it? It's turned around, and then you will see that you can discover more or less the shape of a face. And there it is. Probably a woman's face, not quite sure. It's not very good seen. But that's underneath the image that you just saw. And when you push this one, you'll find more information about the paint layers, how it was worked out. So these are the microscopic examples of a paint layer where you can see the pigments and things like that. And you go up, and here you see an example of what happened to this painting. So all the stages in which it was used. So when he was back in the Netherlands, number one, he bought the canvas. Then it was prepared as that. And then there was a first painting that he painted at the head. You can see something like that. It's just turned around. And there you can see it. Then he covered it up, had a white layer, had with pencil made a sketch of what he's looking out. He laid it in with blue paint and then finished it afterwards with all these colors. So there's a whole layered system, you might say, of this work. And we have done this with several paintings. By now you can look at 9 paintings which are done, research for what's underneath, what kind of brush strokes was used, and well, everything you wanted to know about a painting like that. Now we will go to what probably everybody would regard as the high, and it is, you might say, the best works and the famous periods of Vincent when he went to the south of France. He said himself, in his last year in Paris and when he was moving to the south of France, that he had almost become an alcoholic. Think about the absinthe that we saw in the beginning. And it was better for him to go to some place where it was warm, where the climate was somewhat better. He liked it better when it's warm. He always had this winter depressions, you might say. And he picked up the south of France, of which he heard good stories. He was an avid reader of also of books, of naturalist books, and also some of them were also there in the south of France. So he went to a very small town of Arles, where he worked for, well, just over a year. And that's, of course, also where all the incidents took place, where he had this ear incident, where he took off part of his ear. But in the meantime, he tried to reinvent himself. In Paris, he had learned a lot about different painting styles, the pointillerism, and the way Lautrec painted. But he was on the search, you might say, for a distinctive style of his own. And he worked in this, and in the summer of 1888, in the middle of the summer, when the harvest time was happening around Arles, he made this painting, simply called The Harvest. And he prepared it in the sense that he first went to the spot, which is very close to the city, looking in an eastern direction, but very close to the city. And he prepared it with 2 watercolors that he did first, and then came back to make this painting on the spot. And when he came back and had it in the studio, he wrote a letter to his brother saying, well, this painting kills all the other works that I've done so far. This is such a powerful picture, which is indeed true. When you look how the build-up of this whole work, with the forefront, with the small road here, the hedge there, what you can see as the small trees, and then you look over that into the distance with the wheat fields that you see there. Far in the distance you will see here the Abbey of Montmajour, a very old 13th century abbey, which is on some of the hillsides, which are in the middle of what used to be very Moorish land. There's another hill there, and there's the Alpilles, a wonderful chain of mountains in the background. It reminded him, the view also of the old Dutch masters from the 17th century, like Ruysdael and Philips de Koning, whom he liked very much. And this was for him his image of the rural life. There's also the quietness of everything in its well-balanced composition, the very bright colors, and a wonderful brushstroke, the changes in brushstrokes. For each part that he changed a little bit, making it finer, more refined when you work your way up to the back. It's absolutely a stunning picture, you might say. And we're very proud to have it here. Of course, we have more. We only have time here to go through one floor. Of course, there are many more floors here in the museum. And it's not only Van Gogh Museum, but we have his other artists as well, Gogh and his friends, the people he worked with. Here are a couple of other paintings by Vincent from his art period. Zouave. There was a military in the south of France, from the French Legion, the Zouaves who were trained in Algeria, in the north of Africa, with their beautiful uniforms. And for him, this man, which he described as with the neck of a bull and this eyebrows that always went through as if he was a criminal, for him was it a very powerful, potent man, and as such he portrayed it. But also keeping in mind, when you look at pictures by Vincent, it's all about color and color contrasts. And what he learned in Paris and what he refined, you might say, later in Ireland and later on in his life, is that when you look at a picture by Vincent, you will always see that when there is a bright red somewhere, it will always be contrasted with the complementary of green. And when there is a bluish color, there will be orange in the neighborhood. And other times, when there is a yellowish color, there will be purple in the neighborhood. Unfortunately, is that with the combination of purple and yellow, sometimes has changed because due to the deterioration of certain pigments, some reds have disappeared from Vincent's paintings, and especially when he would use purple, but it would be a mixture of blue and red. The red is gone, it leaves blue. And that contrast sometimes is now different than it was. And you can tell, for instance, by this picture here. It's a field of irises. The foreground is a grass field with lots of small flowers. And in the background, you can see the city of Arles. So there's the old church, the Saint-Trophime church in the middle. Getting out, there's the city hall tower that you can see over there of Arles. Very rural town. In the foreground, you see these beautifully depicted irises. But you can also see that they're more or less more bluish than they are purplish. Sometimes there's still a little bit of purple left. But we found out during our research that there must have been much more brighter purple colors in this painting as well, as there would have been more pinkish colors in this. So it's more like an off-white color. He would mix it also with a little bit of the red, so you get a bright pink. Unfortunately, the red is gone, so what's left is this some murky white color. Funny thing is that it's still absolutely a stunning picture, and that doesn't change anything to it. It's quite recently been restored. I mean, that's also one of the things we do, of course. We have our own restorers in the museum who take very good care of our paintings, clean them when necessary, remove old varnish layers. This one has recently been cleaned, and it's brighter than it ever was. And there's one aspect I want to show to you on a painting like this. It's also about how Vincent works. When you look very close up, you see all these very small, dark blue lines everywhere, and especially in this area. It's like a graphic way of working in detail. You can see the same when you go up and you look at the trees here. You can see all these very dark blue lines. It's as if after you finished laying in the colors in the broader bushwork, he refined it by putting on a drawing, as it were, over the whole picture, making it more composition, get it together more and getting more grip on it and more balanced. And that's what you often see with Vincent. His painting style at a certain point was heavily influenced by his way of drawing. Now we can't show you in this short time drawings because usually drawings are vulnerable to light. We have a lot of them. We have over 500 drawings by Vincent, but we don't have the room to show them permanently. At the moment, there are usually 5 drawings in view, but you can look them up on our website. It's got a wonderful website where all the works of Vincent can be seen in high-resolution images. And you can go through his drawings, and it's really worthwhile to look at Vincent's drawings works. We go now to a painting which is probably one of the famous that he did. It's one of the famous in our museum. It's where everybody who comes to our museum wants to see it. But every once in a while we have to disappoint people that a painting is not here. Sometimes it's on loan to another collection for an exhibition. For instance, now I can't show you the bedroom, Vincent's bedroom. You have to go to Chicago. So if you're looking from Chicago, go to the Art Institute of Chicago to look at our bedroom together with the 2 repetitions that he made. It's a wonderful exhibition. And another picture that's not there, but we have it here in a photograph, is the sunflowers. It's of course one of our major paintings, one of his most famous paintings, of course. He made several of them. The one we have is a repetition of the one he did in the summer of 1888. He made this one in the winter of 1889, so just after he came back from the hospital after having mutilated his ear. He wanted to make more copies of it to form triptychs together with a Berceau's picture of Madame Roulin rocking the cradle, as 2 candelabras, you might say, next flanking this woman. Gauguin, who was at the time, shortly before, with Vincent, enjoyed these paintings of sunflowers very much. Vincent had 2 of them hanging in his room, in Gauguin's room, and made this repetition after one of them. The reason it's not hanging there, it's now gone off the wall for research purposes. Is what we want to know. We want to know more about how Vincent painted, of course, all these things, but always we want to know how to keep them in a good condition. And like everything that's getting old, paintings are no different. They change over the years. They get worn, they get damaged sometimes. We want to know more. So in this case, there is a large research program going on for this painting, and it's explained here on the wall with your senior restorer Ella Hendricks, explaining some things. But all kinds of equipment, X-ray, whatever, we look at these things, and For instance, here you can see there's a little part of it is clean, so to get close to from what's the varnish, how much is the varnish discolored, can we remove it? All these kinds of questions are researched and taken up and will be published about later on. The painting itself will be back in a week, the 24th of March. It will be back in the galleries. So if you're planning to come to the museum, maybe you should wait for a week if you want to see this picture. For the rest, I hope you enjoyed this little tour. It's a very short tour, but intensive, I think, tour of our collection. Thank you for being a fan of us, and hope to see you in the museum sometime.